Anyway, this is all getting cut out. Anyway,
Okay.
so we watched Things to Come.
We did.
What's your...
Okay, like 10% of this book is just H.G. Wells.
That's
apparently.
true. Yeah, that's true.
So, we watched Invisible Man, watched Things to Come, Island of Dr. Moreau. There's another one in there, but
the one coming up, right?
There's gonna be Time Machine, War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
Basically, his entire bookography is gonna be seen by us in movie form.
Yeah.
This movie, man.
What I'll say is that this is like the first movie we've watched on this series in a while where I'm like, it's kind of what I expected going into it, where this is definitely science fiction and it's definitely made in 1930s. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's old. It's like an old movie, obviously, but I could definitely see where this is like foundational underpinning of like modern science fiction movies and stuff like that. I can see it clearly. Whereas, like I said in the other reviews with the Invisible Man and Frankenstein, it's like, well, kind of, but
maybe
when I think of science fiction, I don't think of that monster
right. Maybe like
stuff.
Special effects wise, or some things in the background, sure, but not.
It's like science was like dropped in there, like science made witchcraft, so it's a science fiction movie technically.
Yeah.
But this one is like, this is like big epic scope, futuristic. Like all the costumes are different. Like it's post-apocalyptic. It's utopian. It's like it
does.
Like they did a lot of set, like work with the sets, the costumes, and world building. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say.
That's it.
World
and then,
building.
Like I've said before as well, I like sci-fi that asks questions, and this one honestly probably went a little too far in the other direction.
Where it asked any questions, it just kind of told us answers.
Right. It's specifically like the characters ask the questions without the audience being too. It wasn't very subtle.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It felt like actual sci-fi, and
the monologue percentage of the dialogue, ironically, was pretty high in this one. Old Centaurian white guys talking about progress.
Right. Does war stop progress, or does war make progress? And there's too much progress.
What's to stop progress nowadays? War. Firstly, there isn't going to be a war, and secondly, war doesn't stop progress. It stimulates progress.
Well, do you just want to summarize the story?
Yeah. I mean,
let me summarize the story. You suck at it. Give the people what they want. Okay. So it starts in 1930. Well, it starts in 1940. The movie was made in 1936, but it starts in the dark nightmare world of 1940. On like Christmas Eve, everyone's having a great time, except for there's giant, there's going to be war banners everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, despite the protestations of one happy guy who's constantly like, that's fine, this whole war shenanigans is overblown. Despite that, war were indeed declared. So bombers come. The war goes on until like 1960 or 1965. 1966.
Yeah.
And so it's like a giant cataclysmic world war. Then it's followed by a pseudo zombie plague, which destroys all of society and like puts us into like kind of Mad Max territory almost, which is pretty neat. I mean, but whatever, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So that happens. And then it's about kind of like society is now barbarous, and then this society of aviators, like
aviators
like the
lead
FAA
the charge
is like
into the future.
So somehow, like in Basra, this like flying club of people is like rebuilding society with their magic airplanes, which they do, and then it kind of skips forward to 2036.
Yeah,
and they've kind of established a utopia. A scientific utopia, but then there's this one guy who says we've gone too far, yelling about progress because they're against the space gun shooting people to the moon, and then they shoot those people to the moon, and then it ends. That's it. So it's like a
lot happens.
Like destruction of society, super long war, pestilence, famine, barbarism, and then like
rebuilding into something bigger and better,
like utopia.
Are we going too far?
I'll say like it's strangely both very pessimistic and also very optimistic at the same time, which is weird. It's like we're going to destroy ourselves, but we'll also pick ourselves up from utter like dark ages into utopia in about 60 years, I think.
A lot of science fiction stories use this concept. You just don't see the Dark Ages part of it. Like Star Trek, for example, in the 2200s or whatever. I don't know if it's 2200s. It goes through like the eugenics wars, which is pretty bad. And then
pretty badass, you mean?
Khan fought in the eugenics wars.
Oh yeah.
And he was like a super soldier, and they had to freeze his ass because whatever.
Right.
But whatever. So like Star Trek had that. Yeah, and then a lot of IPs kind of do that.
We'll say about the concept. I get it's kind of like about, well, it's called Things to Come. So it's just like H.G. Wells sitting down, looking at things and saying what's going to happen, basically, I guess, like his prediction of the future, which is pretty cool.
And yeah, and then he didn't just limit it to like 3 years, 5 years. It's like 100 years,
right?
Shown on film, which I don't know if anything else had done quite that at this time.
So I'll say the film, like kind of like what I was saying earlier, it's like less about the characters and stuff like it's really more about like these concepts and like philosophical questions about progress and stuff like that, which is cool. But it shows like wide scale, like World War, and then like I don't know if there's been a depiction of like a post-apocalyptic society in film before this, where they're kind of like living in the ruins of like old London, old Everytown as it's called.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's been done before. It was kind of cool to see like the post-apocalypse where it's like they have the thing where the guy is telling people to shoot the people that are sick because they have no medicine to cure them, and then he becomes like the war chief just because he's like, authoritarian or whatever, which is kind of probably what would happen. Like the police chief just becomes like the warlord of the village or whatever. That's kind of what happened.
Yeah, it was sort of like this Walking Dead.
It was
Mad
weird.
Max.
Like for like a little bit.
Yeah.
It was like people get the plague. There's no cure. They start walking and wandering around like zombies for some reason, and they have to be shot to like keep them from infecting other people. That was like that for like 5 minutes. I was like, wow, this is
sort of, yeah. I mean, again, this is broken up into a few different parts. The first part is just a happy-go-lucky family during Christmas, and yeah, the nightmare future of 1940 at the time. And then, you get to meet these characters a little bit. There's was it Passworthy or whatever? And Cabal.
Yeah.
And then, you get to meet these characters a little bit, and then they just get bombed and everybody dies. Basically. Everybody dies. And then, World War II lasted like, I don't know, 8-9 years. How you do it.
Depends on,
But this war lasts like 26.
Yeah.
And then it just skips ahead to like,
and then it
like
goes straight into like plague, which is like,
this like little future world. That part was kind of boring. It kind of went on a little bit too long, but
I agree.
But the concepts were pretty novel, and I haven't seen those
like when
before.
You're trying to show these to someone for the first time, maybe it has to be a little bit longer. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like we get it immediately. Like, oh yeah, the world collapsed. They're living in like Game of Thrones times, but like I said, that might have been the first time, or at least one of the first times that's been depicted. So it would be like,
what happens when society falls apart?
Yeah,
who takes over?
I'll say we haven't talked about it yet, but like it's kind of nuts because this movie comes out in 1936, and then it's set in 1940. This is before World War II starts, and it's very eerily predictive of what's going to happen in 1940, right? It's
the big things that predicted, were air raids, especially air raids in London.
Like World War, mass bombings of cities. They featured poison gas heavily, but that didn't happen.
Right? Yeah. The poison gas is. I mean, it's always funny. People predicting the future and what it looks like. Because they'll get some things right, but then some things like the guns, the helmets, none of that was sufficiently advanced. And how could you know, right? The airplanes were not advanced. And, progress would be stopped if you had like a war like that just went on and you had the pestilence and everything. But, you compare their 1970 to our 1970 and it's... Sometimes you see like at the same time, they go too far and they don't go far enough. Because what they end at is 2036, and
like they didn't envision, like everyone had a radio back then, and so it's like, okay, radio is everywhere in the future, but they didn't envision that everyone would have a TV, seemingly.
Yeah, they thought everybody would have like a flying car, kind of.
Yeah, a helicopter or something.
Crazy.
Like, what was your impression of the movie? You know what I mean? Your initial impression after watching it.
Story wise, I don't really care because
like it's pretty.
Idea wise, I'm like, all right, that's cool. I mean, none of the ideas to me are new. So for me, the most important thing or the most what stood out the most was like the special effects.
Yeah.
And the way they decided to implement them and sort of the set design, I guess.
Same.
Those
yeah.
were the things that I guess matter to me.
Yeah, like the miniature stuff, the special effects, the costuming, and then also like just the exploration of like big ideas
Mhm.
was what stood out to me. The characters are kind of like whatever, like they're barely honestly in there.
Right. And the thing is, I guess that's one drawback of having a story like this is it takes place over 100 years. And yeah, you can have like a lineage of people. Like it's the same Cabal's family, you know, that's kind of the main characters in this. But you don't have any single character. You don't have any human, any singular human emotions, desires, or like through lines.
There's not really much human drama. Like not a lot. There's some, but it really plays like a movie that was based on like an essay instead of like a novel. You know what I mean? Which I think it
Mhm.
was basically. But whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
it was more interesting to me than a lot of the other stuff that we watched.
Yeah, especially for all the big picture stuff. I mean, I would compare it to like Foundation a little bit. I don't know why people can't do this, but I just want big story that expands, you know, is a little expansive.
Uh-huh.
And with that, I want to have good character drama. But it seems like every show is either, you know, like love triangles and like, you know, nothing, or it's just completely sterile.
Yeah, that's true.
Pointless, no drama.
I think it's like maybe I was thinking about this. Like character drama stuff can happen in any setting and does happen in any setting. And I feel like maybe the problem or whatever a feature of science fiction is that like it tends to draw on those elements that aren't present in other media. Like a character focused movie can happen in like a bus station, right? Like whatever.
Mhm. Or a phone booth.
Or a phone booth. But like a science fiction movie tends to focus, or science fiction thing tends to focus more on the science fiction-y elements, which are necessarily not people.
Yeah.
You know, doesn't matter if Tracy has a crush on Greg or whatever, like in the year 3000. I mean, it does to them, but yeah. But I don't know, Star Wars, we'll talk about Star Wars, but that is more focused on characters and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
there are things that do it, and those things are good, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Those things are better, even better. But I guess what I was saying is like, there's not really much sci-fi that is really big in scope.
Mhm.
Like maybe it takes place over like a year or 2 years.
Oh,
but
I
there's not
understand.
like Foundation or something like takes place over like 1,000 years.
Well, I think the truth is that
It's difficult to do.
on like a historical timescale, human beings are puny. You know what I mean? Like individual lives, Tracy and Greg get washed away, you know, in the span of like 100 years.
Sure.
And it reveals our lives as the pointless things that they are.
Sure.
Again, I look at this and I see like this is the antecedent of like 2001. I can see that.
Yeah.
Not Invisible Man. That's not the antecedent of 2001.
The story, I mean, I think Wells probably sat down and he wrote this essay. And I think the further out he got, the more like optimistic sort of he got.
Yeah.
I mean, the further out you go, the harder it is to extrapolate, right? But the way it ends is in 2036, basically, everybody lives underground, which there's a grandfather talking with his granddaughter about how society used to be and how they had to have windows and like be outdoors sometimes. And this is apparently a terrible thing because they didn't understand the wonders of indoor lighting, basically, and they're like super future city, which is basically like the Shire. Like they live in a giant, you know, house.
They live in a big hobbit hole.
Basically, they live in a mall underground.
Yeah.
And there's indoor lighting, and apparently, I guess,
And air conditioning.
why would you ever go outside when you have indoor lighting and air conditioning?
They built houses like that in the old days.
Why?
They'd no light inside their cities as we have, so they had to stick them up into the daylight. What there was of it.
So,
Which is so wild. The only experience I have from that is from like Devil in the White City, which like early 20th century, because of like lights, they were able to sort of, you know, work all hours. Like there was a nightlife. You know, so for them, I guess it's a big deal to have these sorts of lights and everything, but it's just funny to contrast it now with people would probably love to just be outdoors all the time.
Yeah.
It's just so funny. It's such an unnatural thing that he is making into this like utopia.
right. Let's talk about like the future world. So like it's like in thirds almost, like the
Mhm.
present day
1940, present day.
bombing, post-apocalyptic
Mad
60s
Max world.
and then like the far future.
2036. Yeah.
So like in the future, okay, well let's actually talk about the barbarous part for
Oh,
a second,
sure,
okay?
sure.
Because what happens is it's kind of weird. The film is like very focused on aviation. Bombers come, destroy everything. The pilots union or whatever, the people that know how to fly planes still are like the people that rescue society.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, it's like, should we go even farther and go into space? That's like the big thing. It makes sense to me because at the time that was like crazy cutting, like 1936, like a freaking biplane was like, what? Like, you know. So it makes sense that that's what he chose. But it doesn't make sense from like our perspective now that like,
The air supremacy, the ability to just travel anywhere like that
yeah,
is incredibly advantageous.
Sure,
I
yeah.
get that.
I know, but I wouldn't imagine that like, again, the FAA would, or like the Air Traffic Controllers Union are the people that are going to
I
pull
think
us
it's
out of
more
the
like the Air
apocalypse.
Force.
Maybe that.
Yeah.
But the thing is like the air, like in a apocalyptic kind of thing, I feel like the Air Force is the first thing to go because it requires so much
Specialized equipment
stuff to like
and-
support it, which is what they say, you know, like we don't have gas to run our planes, dog, you know,
Mhm.
or spare parts or stuff like that. But whatever.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts in that middle section was this guy had a Rolls Royce and he was saying how amazing it was. So first of all, he was saying it could go 100 miles in 3 hours, which that was funny. But then after he's done talking and everything, he just has like a horse like pull his Rolls Royce. That was amazing. That was ingenious.
That was hilarious.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's that kind of stuff where it's showing like the breakdown, like modern society to them, but like broken down. That I don't know if had been seen before. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean,
that's pretty interesting to
right,
me.
because it's not just like a breakdown of society. It's what would happen like 10 years after that, where things are still kind of pretty bad.
Yeah.
That constant, because of the plague, right? They can't like rebuild. And so it's just like a constant beat down.
Like they live in the ruins of like 1940 London.
I think conceptually they had the dark ages to kind of think about, but I don't think anybody really applied it to mainstream culture then.
But in the future, in 2036, the distant future.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Everyone lives underground for some reason. Everyone lives like in a big cave underground, but it looks like really well lit.
Yeah. Oh, before that. So going from that second third to that third part of the film, there's like an amazing montage.
The industrialization
amazing montage where they like build this city.
Yeah.
Really well done. I mean, they used, so we talk about like double exposure, lots of miniatures. Yeah, and it went on for a while, but I don't really mind. It was
it was cool.
Pretty,
it was
pretty
just,
incredible.
like showing progress encapsulated in one montage. So in the future, they kind of just like casually hinted this. So it's only been, the funny thing is to me, it's been like, 60 years from total barbarism to this. But through the magic of science, they say that they've like cured all diseases. People don't sneeze anymore. No one has a cold. Lifespans are extended. Like everything is like perfect.
Well,
it's a utopia, right?
Sure.
That's kind of nuts.
Is it? So you can go from 1940 to 2000 in current day and think of what that is.
I mean, is it that much better?
Yeah.
We still sneeze. We still have diseases.
Yeah, we still sneeze, but the advancements that we made, like, you know what I mean? Like he didn't know that.
I think he just took it to like what I would imagine like 1,000 years, like the pinnacle. Like we've solved everything. It's kind of how it felt.
Maybe, but they didn't solve everything. But no, I think it's just people underestimate the complexities of certain things, like a cold, right? He probably wrote that in as like, oh yeah, we have antibiotics. I don't know. Yeah, we have like antibiotics. We have all this stuff. Like, sure, we want to have a cold or whatever. For him, the cold part was probably like the least crazy thing. The craziest thing for him was probably like flat screen TVs. No, that's crazy. But then we look at it now, we're like, oh, this TV part's super easy. That cold part's still hard because of viruses, whatever, right? It's difficult to say what's easy, what's hard, where technology will go to, what roadblocks will hit.
Well, he did all this like giant war destruction with no, I don't know if there's no concept, but like nuclear weapons, that was not a thing. That was not in the movie. That was not I don't know if he knew about them. The most depressing part is that he very accurately deduced that there would still be idiots in the future and portrays that shockingly and frustratingly accurately.
Yeah, I mean, I got to give him kudos for that.
It was so It was so annoying.
Yeah, so Theotokopoulos,
Oh,
this
yeah.
guy in a toga who's just sitting on a bench and just goes, progress.
Yeah, basically. It's a little weak.
It is a little weak, but he says some things in there that he says something like, I can talk on the radio. People will listen to me.
Suppose someone cried, "Halt! Stop this progress!"
Like, why don't I just say stuff? Like,
Yeah.
I could stop all this. And
So
he's right.
they're trying to shoot people to the moon with a space gun. And for him, that is a bridge too far, apparently. He's like, this must be stopped. He's like, I know we live in a crazy utopia where everything is solved by science, but we need to stop now. Science has gone too far.
Yeah, this is one thing. All right, two things here. Giant space gun, interesting, 1936. Weird that they don't have like the concept of rocket powered sort of flight. But I guess even the airplanes are biplanes, so what are you gonna do?
You know, like the trip to the moon and what was the other one? Was it Jules Verne, the space gun?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems to be a common concept that you're going to use a big gun to get to space.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, they had rockets, but like it wasn't until World War II and like Werner von Braun and like rocketry was more advanced to that point, I guess. But like, so I was looking this up because one of the problems with shooting yourself to space in a giant gun is like the G forces, I think, are way higher.
Yeah, the G-force and the friction, you need sustained sort of energy, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like one pop and then you go, as opposed to the shuttle, which is like still like,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
You go to
putting
a
out
constant
thrust.
rate. Yeah.
So I looked up, and then on the space shuttle, they experience about 3 Gs.
Mhm.
And it's not even like, that's like at the max. It's not even for like most of the time, 3 Gs at launch, you know, which is not that much really. Like fighter pilots like doing maneuvers at high speed get the max at like 9 Gs.
Mhm.
And we watch Top Gun, so you can go to 10 Gs.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I was looking up this, so I did a little calculation, and like the space gun would generate like 1,200 Gs or something like that. So you would just die.
I think they solved it in the movie. They said, beware the concussion.
Right. Right. So that's the problem with using a big gun to get to space. But
Yeah. You have 2 guns?
you can use a gun to get a rocket.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a giant gun. Very beautiful, like building
Well, yeah.
miniatures.
I don't know if you want
Great.
to talk about that separately, but like all of the miniatures and stuff were like great. They had like little tanks, like future tanks, running over like miniaturized rubble.
Very anime like.
It was pretty cool. I mean, that they had a new like airplane designs that were really cool looking.
Yeah.
Like those big ones that they dropped like happy gas out of, or like
Yeah, gas of peace.
the gas of peace.
Jump round your squadron.
Well, now we've got a chance to try the new gas of peace on somebody.
And like they had paratroopers and stuff. I mean, all that stuff was, again, like they had to like concept art that stuff, and like this is what the future's like.
Yeah. So again, I'm impressed with the special effects, which I
That
think
was all
throughout
good.
all of these movies, I have been like very impressed with the set designers and the people who like made the actual special effects.
I feel like this one made a specific point out of like that was like a big part of it is like the spectacle, you know, like all the airplanes and like the future designs and stuff. I feel like was more Metropolis also.
Yeah, it's interesting to compare to that because Metropolis is 10 years earlier, which is a pretty good comparison. Ironically, yeah, Wells didn't want this to be anything like Metropolis, but
I wouldn't either.
yeah, but you know, the miniature cities, all those things kind of go together.
Yeah. So yeah, the frustrating thing is the guy's like yelling about progress. Something along the lines of like, we're happy now. How far is too far?
Yeah, this was really frustrating me. It was, but
Right.
you're lamenting that like someone out there is like furthering society.
Well, like 2 people are willfully going on this mission, and it is very upsetting to him. So he rallies all of the people in a giant mob to go destroy the space gun before they can launch.
And he says things like, if you succeeded, I would be angry. And if you failed, I would be happy. Like,
Yeah, I would be angry if you succeeded in your mission.
yeah, just,
You know, the problem with it, I mean, among many problems, we're talking about that term Luddite, which is like someone that's anti-progress, anti-technology. Even if there is like an argument like we shouldn't do this, you can't just like decide not to. You know what I mean? Like how would you do that? You know, like
I mean, you as a society would say, okay, we're going to strip all funding for, scientific research. And 15 years from then, you'd get taken over by your neighbor. That's
right?
what would happen.
That's what I mean. Like
yeah.
you can't. Maybe even you shouldn't like discover some things, or that some things discoveries are bad for humanity. But I don't know how you prevent that from occurring.
Yeah, you can't.
It's like this box, and you're like, okay, just don't open it. But the first person to open it gets to rule the world. Like it's really not feasible, I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever. But yeah, so they literally go to this futuristic utopian society, goes down with with clubs to like club the space gun to
rods of metal.
Rods of
they're called
metal, yeah. Before they can launch it. What he says, kind of at the end, to try to make it make sense, is that like, if they send these people to the moon, soon they'll be sending all of us to live on Jupiter, where it's cold and stuff. That's basically what he says.
A time will come when you in your turn will be forced away to take your chance upon strange planets and in dreary, abominable places beyond the stars.
Pretty weak, but...
And then the rebuttal from our main guy, Passworthy.
It's Cabal.
Cable. Anyways, his argument is basically like, if we don't do this, we're no better than animals. So we have to push forward and progress.
Yeah.
It's not like anybody was forced to do anything.
No, like I said, I think you could write that in a way that's more
compelling, realistic.
Yeah, that makes more sense. But the thing is, like, the guy, like the protagonist is like for progress, and that other guy, that third act antagonist, is like anti-progress. That's a very like vague and broad thing to be against. You know what I mean?
Just all progress.
It's like the war on terror. It's like the war on progress.
And yet I see that and I'm like, oh yeah, I get it.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Let this be the last day of the scientific age.
I will say that the progress crowd, it's a little bit sterile. Star Trek, I think, has a little bit more time to devote to exploring sort of their society and why it is the way it is.
Yeah.
But in this one, it's a very rational sort of society, and you just kind of have to accept it that way. And so, when Cabal comes in on his plane into the Mad Max future.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm here for order and sanity, or law and sanity. It's a pretty good juxtaposition with his like rational mindedness with our
warlord.
But to have an entire society of people like him, it's like, where did they come from? Why do they believe what they believe? Or what are the problems with their society?
Yeah.
The 1960s version of that. And was there really no issues with them going from 1966 to 2036? Like in those 70 years, like things just progressed peacefully. There was no internal strife. Nothing happened. And then by the time they get to 2036, right, it's like, it feels like progress for progress sake, which is fine. But again, without any character drama, without any of that kind of conflict, it does feel a little bit sterile.
Yeah, I agree. I'll say two things. One, it's very idealistic and utopian. Like the world descends into madness, but then this like, old white guy lands and he's like just the paragon of like rational thought. And he's like, by thinking rationally, we could solve all the world's problems.
Right.
And like, it's very idealistic. They come in with their peace gas, the gas of peace, release the hounds of peace.
Yeah.
So they just drop like sleeping gas on everybody and then they civilize them without any like killing anybody. Really?
Yeah.
So that's all very idealistic, that they would come out of this like 20-year war like that, And then the whole future is like very, very idealized, like everyone is very rational and like works together and all this stuff, like you said. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is that it's like a weird thing, but in a society where no one has any problems, it's kind of not interesting. It's kind of boring, right? Because you're like, well, no one wants anything because they have everything they want. No one has any problems, like health problems, or it's kind of like it's kind of this weird thing where if you have no conflict, like there's no, it's boring,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that was the intent was to explore that specifically.
No.
But, I will say those people, right? When he gave that speech, Theotokopoulos, 100% of that entire city was with him, like immediately.
Yeah.
So there's some frustration somewhere.
Yeah. They didn't explore any of that stuff, really. Like what problems they still had or whatever.
Yeah, it seems like they just didn't like hearing about progress because they didn't have to do anything. They just get to live in their little shopping mall underground. And
I don't know. They were so against two people of their own free will going on a space capsule that they stopped everything in their day, went to go grab metal pipes and went down to beat the shit out of the space gun, which is like, that's a lot. You could have made the whole movie maybe about that if you wanted to, but
sure. But getting there was more interesting, I think.
Yeah.
That's the real character is the city, every town.
That's true. That is your one anchoring thing that changes over time is like the city.
And it's cool they use the same set. So the concept, story, awesome, great. I guess the acting, we could say, it was passable. Nobody really
The characters are very like
stood out.
They're like mouthpieces for like philosophical ideas. Like they just give monologues or stuff like that,
Yeah, I did like.
I didn't even know who. I'm like, who's that guy again?
Yeah, it was a little Charles Carson. He played the great grandfather.
Like at the beginning?
No, in the middle where he's talking about no more colds and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I liked him. And then the guy who played John Cabal, Raymond Massey, was pretty good too.
They did fine. But like what emotions did he have to convey? He just kind of conveyed stern confidence.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's kind of it. The whole time, just like stern confidence in him, in his beliefs. That's basically all he showed.
Yeah. Was it Ralph Richardson, the boss, the guy, the Mad Max boss?
Yeah.
So I liked
He was good. He had more going on.
Yeah. He had an interesting character. I mean, he actually had a character
that was like the most interesting character is like this warlord. Because like you get the sense that like
he had a past.
He wanted to do like he wasn't like a bad guy necessarily. He was like
he was the guy they needed.
Yeah, exactly. You get the feeling like, well, he helped them get through this horrible time, but now he's no longer needed, and he's like becoming more authoritarian or something. That makes it sound more interesting than it is. But anyway, that was the most interesting character.
And then I guess soundtrack. So originally Wells wanted the soundtrack to be made first and then for the visuals to kind of follow the music.
Why though? Why did he want that?
I think it creates a certain movement in the film.
I guess was he trying to like do more like portray more like opera?
I think
operatic.
The way that he kind of envisioned this was maybe like a super montage. Where it's just like music, like Fantasia or something.
Oh, I
think that's probably what
I could see that
envisioned.
I could see that actually pretty well.
Yeah,
because like again, the characters really are not.
Yeah, the characters don't really matter.
You could have just shown that like in a weird fever dream for like an hour.
Yeah, because I mean, parts of the movie are like that, where it's just music really and cool visuals. The beginning with the war posters and the juxtaposition, or then the montage with the building of the great city, or when the bombing happens, so the really big key points of the movie are shown that way with music and visuals.
But that
only.
didn't end up happening.
No. But the music is definitely a lot more prevalent than it is in the other movies that we've seen. And especially in the beginning, I liked it. Cacophony of war.
The costumes.
The costumes.
The future, I mean, it's got like this very, so like, for the Europeans, even then at the Dark Ages, like the Dark Ages happened, you're living in like a collapse of society. You then look back in the Renaissance to like 1,000 years before Greeks and Romans and stuff like that. And like hold that up as like the pinnacle of civilization.
Yeah. And in this case, I think they were probably literally like he emulated that, right? Where it's like, oh, Dark Ages, like the Mad Max world that we see. Oh, it'll be like the Dark Ages. And then what came after that? Oh, when we went back to classical stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even the guy's name is like Theotokopoulos, like a Greek name, right?
That's
and they're wearing togas and space togas or whatever.
Look like the Ginyu Force.
Yeah, you're right. They do look like the Ginyu Force.
Yeah.
Like future fashion is always like interesting how people portray it, because I feel like it usually goes to like hyper minimalism,
As it should. I mean, if you
think
ask me what the future of fashion is, I would just say hospital scrubs.
It's gotten more minimalistic.
Yeah, it's just gonna be hospital scrubs, right? Like, why would it be anything other than just hospital scrubs?
I don't know. I think you have to like look at fashion as like, why did it develop the way it did? And it was a lot.
Usually, it's utilitarian.
Usually, yeah. But I feel like back then, before people had iPhones, it had more stuff going on. Well, it had less stuff going on, I mean, but had more time to dress like a peacock, and they did, I guess.
I mean, that's all they did, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You mean like the 1800s?
Yeah. Like all you could do is go outside and talk to people. So like your dress mattered a lot more than now, where you're like drinking a coffee and texting somebody, and you're like, I ain't got time to wear nothing but scrubs, right?
Right.
So I feel like I guess that's a good bet, is more minimalist.
And I think we're, as a society, prioritizing
The right.
function over form. Yeah. And so scrubs, I think, are the true embodiment of.
But like 100 years from now, do you think it'll be like people are so bored? Like, could you imagine a Star Trek future where people have everything, so they're so bored that they dress really extravagantly?
I'm sure they will. But again, I think people, I think people at the core of it
Are lazy?
are incredibly lazy, which I respect a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if you just left people to their own devices, their ideal would be
Toga?
like, just, I want to wear basically nothing. I want to feel good. I don't want to have any inconvenience at all. I don't want to look bad. Fine. A few pockets would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think scrubs are basically that, or like a onesie or something. You know, it's this.
But then how do you show off if you're rich or whatever, you know? How do you do that?
Those people can do whatever, man.
But like, what do they do, you know?
I mean, you'll have like the hospital scrubs, but then you'll have like
the figs?
some bangle or something, or, you have like a nice belt. I don't know.
That's what yeah.
Again, there will always be people who like will do those things. But I think for most of us, we just want to do, it's like jeans and a t-shirt, right? It's like.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, it's just interesting things to think about when you're thinking about future fashion for like some sort of sci-fi thing.
Yeah.
What do you think about,
Watching these movies, I have a lot more appreciation for like set design and costume design. I think that's probably one of my favorite things of all of these movies, is just seeing how they build this world.
Yeah, exactly. You know what often goes into things that I think people don't think about it maybe as much as like material science. It like kind of enables minimalism. You know what I mean? So that's why future stuff is more minimalist. Like it's just a cube, because you don't have to show the bricks.
Yeah, you don't need a buttress for your church.
Exactly. Yeah, or maybe like you don't need as many buttons to hold everything together, because like sewing technology has advanced. I mean, I don't know.
That's very true. Very true. Nice.
So that's like probably a part of it, like a subconscious part that you're like, it's always getting more or more minimalist. I think part of the reason.
That's a good point.
I think this idea first came to me with like skyscrapers. Like you look at like cathedrals and stuff, and then like skyscrapers, like modern, it's just like a big plate of glass. You know what I mean? It's like a big window, the whole thing. And that they couldn't do that before because glass wasn't like strong enough to support a building before. Now it is. So you can do that. So that's why it looks the way it does.
I thought about that.
You know what else had like the Hunger Games? Oh my God. Like the costumes in that. Like future rich people from the Hunger Games. Like they dress like crazy. That's the other way to go, is like just complete like lunacy. But that's more like I'm a billionaire and I'm just nuts.
I can see that happening. Like powdered wigs make a comeback.
Yeah,
like little like frocks, and people start wearing like
what is that called? Like that thing. What is that called?
Yeah, the miniatures were great. So they use double exposure sometimes when they sort of had the montage of the city being made. But the way that you can tell when something's a miniature, usually because I think like the speed at which things move,
it's
the
like
clarity.
It's like the speed and the shadows, I think. Yeah. I think it's because like, well, one of the things is like everything falls at the same rate, right? Because gravity works that way.
So what they need to do really is slow down a lot of these like the macro like macro photography shots that they got. They need to slow them, I think, down a little bit. That would have been a little bit more convincing.
It's like if you see like a little pebble fall off a miniature cliff, it's going to fall like really fast because the distance is not that long. Yeah. But if you imagine that like a giant boulder going off a huge cliff, it would take longer because they both fall at the same rate, but the distance is actually much longer. And then like the shadows, I think, are part of it too. Like if something is
the mismatch between the lighting of the foreground and like the superimposed sort of background.
Yeah, exactly. They very clearly didn't match.
Yeah, and the focal length as well doesn't match.
Right. Yeah.
So all those things together.
You want to cut to that part where they just had those beakers that were just bubbling, like beakers like this big, but they're supposed to look like industrial vats.
Yeah.
Just
if you just slow it down, I think I'll try that. You can see how it would look better.
Yeah.
But whatever they tried, and the vision that they had for the future, it was realized. I think. I love that mall thing. I love that space gun. Everything looked pretty good, and you already talked about the planes looking pretty good as well.
Mm-hmm. They would not fly. that one that he had, like the little one that he was in, I don't think that would work at all.
Tipping, like there's no stability.
I don't know. The funny thing is, it's like super far into the future, but like, they're not jet engines because jet engines were not a thing yet. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, their hyper advanced plane. It's got like 2 propellers,
Yeah. You're always limited by your own knowledge, your own imagination. It's easy to take, if somebody says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can count up to like 100, but you don't realize like they're just going to switch to like A, B, C, D at like 26, Yeah.
You can't it's hard to make up it's easy to say, hey, propeller planes, they'll be even faster propellers, stronger, but not like,
I'm surprised they don't have it just like a centipede of like just 100 propellers.
But anyway, it's hard to just come out of left field and say, 10 years from now, they're going to invent a whole new way of propelling airplanes. And that's going to look like this. Like that would be impossible, basically.
But I think, when you're thinking about sci-fi, you can look at something now and just kind of say, okay, this is going to, let's make it more of this. Or you can, the other way to do it really is just like magic. Just think of something, like think of the effect that you want to achieve and just make it so,
You just make it completely wild, but then...
And then have somebody else figure out the internals.
I think the thing is, like, if you just think of like a magic thing that doesn't exist yet, you may be right, but it's pretty hard to get that right. Like, let's say like, we could upload our consciousness in 30 years,
But that's not even making it up. That's us using things that we know now.
I guess that's true. But completely out of left field, you make a thing, but that's like a whole different like IP defined by that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he really wanted to like project like this is what the future really could look like. So you have to take existing technologies or technologies that have some basis and like project them. There's a clip from The Simpsons where like the professor is like talking about like in 10 years they think computers will be 100 times bigger and 10 times faster. It's like that what you're talking about. They just take it and they project it.
But overall, this movie, it's still hokey like some of the older movies.
Like it's not like,
but there's talking. The music is really good, or it's better used. There's multiple characters. There's a pretty big story that they're trying to tell. If I just saw this movie right without seeing the others, I'd be like, okay, like I would be a little impressed, but. Now, after seeing all of the other movies, I understand
how
the leaps forward that have been made in terms of special effects, storytelling,
concept,
even like sound, how much they've added with music.
Yeah, that's true.
It allows me to appreciate that. I feel old, Gandalf. Is that what he says?
I think so, yeah. I want to see mountains, Gandalf. Mountains. I feel like by the rules of this, if the ring had been created in a lab, but then everything else happened exactly the same, it would count as sci-fi, which I don't think is true.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Is this just us like crapping on classic movies?
Yeah.
I mean, truthfully, from the modern perspective, they don't hold up. I mean, you know what I mean?
No, conceptually they hold up. Special effects wise, they're interesting.
It's like it's interesting in the context of like this is a big part of like science fiction history.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting in that sense, but it's not like you're gonna watch it blind and like be just endlessly overjoyed.
To a viewer,
it doesn't. Entertained.
Yeah, to a viewer, it doesn't mean as much unless you care about the history behind it. And even to somebody who's making movies, the problem is like if you're trying to make like a 2025 Honda Accord, you're going to look at a 2024 Honda Accord. You're not going to look at a Model T.
Yeah.
So the guy who made the 2024 Accord will look backwards and so on and so on. And so the guy who made the 1970 whatever can look at this. But all that work has already kind of been folded into
Yeah.
the general knowledge base.
But I guess the
So-
point for this is to see where it comes from
Yeah.
or to see the development. I guess that's the
Right.
point.
Which
What the hell's the point of this again?
I feel old.
I liked it more than most of the stuff we had seen recently.
Yeah. Next up is, I mean, we're gonna. Well, there's a lot of crap in here, but oh wow, I thought we
Oh,
were like
dude.
almost to 2001. We're not even halfway there.
2001's like in the middle, right?
Yeah,
It's like 25. Where are we at?
we're in the beginning.
Oh God!
At the end of-
Oh my God! We've only done 7 of these.
It feels like so much more.
This is the 6th one. We've only done 6. It feels like we've done like 12.
I know.
Holy. Okay, well, once we get to 2001, I'm
Mhm.
actually interested in a lot of them after that.
Yeah. Well, my hope is that as time goes on, the movies will get better just because of technology.
But it's
and everything.
it's gonna take like another 12 movies before they get better.
Look, even this movie, even Things to Come, compared to like The Invisible Man, was, I mean, that was a big step up, right? So
Ah,
maybe the Cold War will work in our favor and create better storylines or something.
I don't want to watch Planet of the Apes. I know it's a big thing, but I never liked it.
He can talk.
Yeah, right. I can sing.
Did The Simpsons parody every single one of these at some point?
Maybe, man. We should watch The Simpsons.
Will they come back? Yes, and go again and again, till the landing is made and the moon is conquered.